CRP went from 50 down to like 0.2 after doing carnivore, and her symptoms went away completely. And she said to the enterologist, like, hey, I made these changes to my diet. I found these foods are problematic for me. This is really helping. And she goes, yeah, I don't think this is food related at all. She completely denied the association between food and gastrointestinal issues.
Scott, first of all, thank you for taking the time to do this, and welcome back. It's been a while since I've chatted with you. You're still on the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, I'm in New York City now.
Good. How's life there these days?
A little bit crazy. I found out recently that we are in our zip code is the highest population density in the United States, 150,000 people per square mile.
That's a lot of people. It's kind of like you're going to be like Tokyo someday. I think I don't know which city has the highest population, but something like that. I think somewhere back in Asia, they've got people just stacked on top of each other like mice or something like that. So that's got to be, well, a lot of people. I'm out in the country on 5 acres, and I got 4 neighbors and within about 2 miles. So it's not a little more than that. But anyway, aren't familiar with you, Scott. Can you just kind of give us a little background on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, everyone. My name is Scott Myslinski. I'm the host of the Carnivore Cast. It's a podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle. Shawn's been on there 4, maybe 5 times, as have Brett and probably some others here. I interviewed doctors, researchers, experts, as well as N=1 case studies, folks who have alleviated chronic conditions and overcome things like major depression, PCOS, Crohn's, etc., on a carnivore diet. Podcast has been going for, I think, 4 years now. We're almost at 200 episodes, over 2.5 million downloads. And yeah, it's just been fun. I put out an episode every week. And I myself was on a carnivore diet strictly for 3 years, which helped me tremendously. And I'm happy to get into that. But yeah, I'm just a huge fan of Shawn and everything you've done for the community. Big fan of the diet itself, and happy to be here.
Yeah, it's 2.5 million people, 2.5 million downloads. So I don't know how many, tens of thousands of people have listened in, and probably some of them changed their lives for the better. That's for sure. Yeah, just if you don't mind, just kind of share your little story. What got you into trying this crazy nutty diet that people criticize all the time? But what was the deal with you?
Yeah, so it was back in October of 2016, actually. I think right around the time that you started your experiment. I think you started in December or January of that year. And I heard Amber Hearn on the 2 Keto Dudes podcast. She was talking about how plants were unnecessary and possibly even harmful in a lot of ways. And I had been following for a long time, evolve from a standard American diet to a low carb diet to more primal and paleo and something resembling a keto diet, but there wasn't really much popularity even around keto diets back then. So it was more a high protein, low carb, high fat diet. And I was coming off years of being a competitive lightweight rower, where I had massive restriction in diet. I had really low bone density. I had poor GI health. I had low lean body mass for my size. I was kind of metabolically broken in a lot of ways, and was always looking for something that could help improve my body composition, improve my well-being, my energy. I worked 80 to 90 hours a week. And I was already eating basically a lot of meat, plus some nuts, plus a lot of spinach and green vegetables, some avocado. And I thought, hey, I would love to just eat as much meat as I want. That sounds tremendous. And Amber's arguments were very convincing. And also at the time, I followed this guy, Ash Simmons, known as High Stakes or Carnivore's Creed. He has a popular blog on carnivore diet, and he had already been doing it for several years. And so I thought I'd give it a shot and, tried it out, just tried eating as much meat as I could. as much as I wanted. And I made a lot of mistakes back then. There weren't as many great resources as there are now, like your book, Shawn, Revero, a lot of the great coaches that are out there, and a lot of the popular YouTube and other getting started and troubleshooting guides and communities. So I was doing a lot of things wrong, but I still got amazing results pretty quickly, and learned a lot over time, and followed that diet very strictly from 2016 to the fall of 2019. And yeah, it improved my metabolic function tremendously, got in the best shape of my life. My GI health improved, my sleep, my energy, my workouts, and I started the podcast along the way.
Awesome. Awesome. It's great to hear. And so I can't remember if I knew you were rowing or not, because, you know, I did some rowing stuff, you know,
Yeah.
obviously. So lightweight's 160, had to be under 165.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually weighed in, I was helping the boat average. So I was weighing in at like 149,
Wow. Yeah.
commonly.
Yeah. So you got to be able to put out a lot of power per weight if you're going to weigh that light. So that's
Yeah.
and for people that don't know, rowing can be pretty brutal for sure. There's
Yeah.
it's a tough sport for sure.
I think the way you do it, Shawn, and the way you train is a lot smarter and healthier than the way like actual rowers train. You know, I was doing 3 or 4 hours of rowing a day, like basically chronic cardio, putting your body in a state of chronic stress, not these, you know, shorter, intense workouts. We did sprints sometimes, sure, but it was, you know, the cardio bunny mindset of get as many miles as you can, and, you know, just day in, day out, year round, and not a lot of emphasis on weights or building muscle or, you know, even getting sufficient protein. And so, you know, I was always dieting. I was always doing a ton of steady state rowing, and I think that wreaked havoc on my system.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking to me. When I went down in 2018 when I won the Indo World Championships, there was one of the rowers who was on the U.S. Olympic team at the time, and he was on a carnivore diet, and he ended up pulling like a 5:45 2K, which I think is
Wow.
phenomenal, right? You know, it's one
Yeah,
of
it's great.
it's huge. I was asking about his weight training routine for the U.S. national team. They said they really don't have anybody teaching them. I was just literally shocked that the U.S. Olympic team does not have a dedicated strength training, you know, person that.
Yeah.
You know, I guess, you know, it's interesting. I guess, you know, rowing is a bit of a fringe sport, so they don't put the money in there. But God, my gosh,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So you're still doing the podcast. What are some of the? Well, let me ask you this, because you said you were on it for 3 years, and you know you're no longer strict. What does your diet look like today?
Yeah, now I eat, it's still the basis of my diet, and every meal is animal protein. But I'm able to eat a lot more foods without detriments to my health, to how I look, to how I feel, to my blood markers, to any of my symptoms prior. And that was through a very slow and systematic reintroduction of foods, not because I thought I had to, not because I thought it was smart, simply because for me, I got to the point where I couldn't digest fat above about 150 grams a day. And my maintenance calories just to maintain my weight was like 3,500 calories. So if you do the math, you know, 150 grams of fat, if I can't eat that, then I'm eating less than 1,000 calories of fat. That means I'm eating like 2,500 calories of protein, which is just, it's a lot basically on your digestive system. I was sweating all the time. I was peeing all the time. I was peeing through the night. And I was getting, from the fat, if I tried to eat more fat, I was getting really bad burps and like bloating, especially during the night, far away from meals. And I tried a million different things, eating, you know, only raw suets, changing my fat sources, changing my meal timings, etc. And ultimately, to me, it just came down to, you know, I'm a very active guy, and I need a lot of food, and just like you do, but my stomach for some reason couldn't tolerate more fat or more protein. And so I was forced to try carbs. And so I actually consulted with Seamland at the time, and he, you know, understood what I was going through and some of my troubles with sleep, especially. And he recommended, you know, having a little bit of carbs pre-bed. And so I started with, you know, a banana an hour and a half before bed, and just tried that for like weeks. And then I slowly, like one food at a time, added other things, honey, other fruits, some white rice, like very benign carb sources, not piling on the fiber or anything like that. And, it helped me. I was able to eat more food without hurting my stomach. But there were setbacks. There were times where my body was like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you eating so much fiber? And it kind of backfired. But slowly I got to a point where I am now, where I'm able to tolerate a lot more foods. And, I'm not eating junk. I'm eating mostly like completely single ingredient carbs, like white potatoes, or I eat a lot of actually cream of rice, which is basically just ground up white rice flour, nothing else added to it, no fiber, anything like that. But just because I am so active and I have those problems with digesting fat and carbs, I eat a lot more foods. But I'm still a massive advocate of the carnivore diet. I still have a podcast about the carnivore diet. The podcast has never been about what is Scott eating, what is Scott's diet today. And I wouldn't recommend what I'm doing for most people. I just share that because that's my experience, and I like to be honest about how I went about it.
Yeah, I mean, and there's many people, and I think that's a neat thing is, you can fix your digestive tract or whatever to where you can tolerate other whole foods, and I think there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And I certainly encourage people to experiment. And there's people that don't want to do that, or people that are perfectly happy doing an all meat diet. And look at like guys like Brett Lloyd, who 1,400 days or whatever it is of eating bacon and ground beef every day, and happy can be. And so that's great too. And that's something that I mean, anybody that's been around me long enough knows that that's been, even if you read my book, I talk about adding carbs in as athletes. And I think that's, those are the folks that are most likely to better handle those things. I think as as we get older and older, and I'm an older athlete, I don't do as well with that sort of stuff. And so I just kind of stick to kind of a meat-based diet, and it works really, really, really well for me. What, as far as the response you've gotten, are you subject to a lot of criticism for doing this? I mean, this is not a popular, I mean, it's, it goes against the narrative of save the planet, save the animals, all that stuff. Do you get a lot of sort of negativity directed at you?
Yeah, I mean, you get the vegan DMs, you're murdering animals, you're a horrible person, I hope you rot in hell, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes YouTube comments, but really it's like, Shawn, it's 1% compared, well, maybe for you it's a little bit different because you're such a public figure, but it's 1% compared to all the people who are supportive and generally very positive and thankful and a fan. And I'm sure I get 1,000th of the messages you get about, you changed my life, blah, blah, blah. But every single one is incredibly meaningful. And I'm very grateful, and very grateful to be in a position where I'm able to help someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, I do get some negativity, but it is a very minor part of that. And yeah, I get hundreds of messages a day. It's kind of crazy to keep up with this stuff, but yeah, it's like 1% is some knucklehead vegan that's just trying to, I don't know if they want attention or if they're mentally deficient or something like that. Probably.
Yeah, and those people are hurting. I always think like, what is going on in that person's life that they have to seek out people to criticize and hate on and wish awful things upon them. Like, they must just be in a really dark place, and I kind of feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. There's a vegan activist in Australia. I can't remember, Tosh something Robertson or something like that, or she's sort of notorious there. She's been kicked out of, I think, Western Australia for her antics, and I guess she has a son, and she goes by Vegan Booty. And her son, who I think is 13, started messaging me, telling me how I'm a murderer and all this stuff, and hopefully I die. And I think, how does a 13-year-old kid get so, just disturbed that they would do that? They think it's okay to wish death upon, another human being. And I'm just like, when I realized it was a kid, I said, hey, look, man, sorry you're going to change your mind in a few years, and just try to convince a guy that, look, this is, if you think that your diet is not causing animal death, which they seem to think it's not the case. And it's accidental, it's incidental, it's not intentional. I said, well, no, pesticides are very much put on crops with the intent to kill things. And so anyway, Brett is saying that the Carnivore Cast was his first interview, so he's happy about that. Well,
I'll
that's
never
good.
forget it either, Brett.
Yeah, Brett's done some good interviews and quite a few, and I think he recently. I'll have to ask guys his little maybe on another day. We'll ask guys. He got to speak in front of a bunch of Harvard medical students, courtesy of Chris Palmer, the other day, trying to
Cool.
tell them about that stuff. But are you finding? I mean, this is something that do you see a lot? Are you still seeing a lot of growth within the carnivore community? I mean, you're kind of I've seen where like a few years ago, the vegans said, well, if we just ignore these carnivore people, they're going to go away. It's just a fad. I don't know. That's not what I'm seeing, but what's your perspective on the East Coast and within your little circle?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have a much better view on that than me, Shawn. I don't see it slowing down. I don't see it fading away. I don't see any major drop off in people listening to my podcast, people reaching out. I mean, it's hard to, we're all in our social media bubbles. That's the way the platforms work. They give you more of the exact content you want to see. So if you follow carnivores, you're going to see carnivores. If you follow vegans, you're going to see vegans. So it's hard to know how much it's breaking through to like mainstream media, but you see more athletes, actors, popular celebrities trying the diet. I've had, it just seems very common when someone like one of my in-laws will mention to a friend, oh, Scott has his Carnivore Cast podcast, and people say, oh, the carnivore diet, I know that. And so it seems like the collective awareness of the carnivore diet has actually been increasing. But yeah, I don't think it's something that's going away anytime soon because it's working so well for so many people.
Yeah, that's I think it's we're getting more and more awareness. People at least know what it is. I mean, many people still think it's awful and dangerous
Yeah.
and comical and all that sort of stuff, and yet we continue to see people whose lives are just utterly changed for the better. Do you? Well, let me ask you about. You said you still base your diet in a very very much a meat based diet. What does that look like? I mean, what is a day? I mean, you mentioned some of the
Yeah.
carbohydrate sources, but what are you eating day to day?
Yeah. And my wife, I should mention, is still 100% carnivore. She's now been on the diet longer than I think almost as long as I was strictly. And she was diagnosed with Crohn's by a gastroenterologist at Tufts Medical. So not just some random doctor. And she had a high sensitivity C-reactive protein score. It's a global marker of inflammation of 50, which is incredibly high. Like it's supposed to be below 1. And she was having terrible symptoms, gastro symptoms, and carnivore is the only thing that helped her. And specifically, I know this is sometimes controversial and different for different people, but needing to cut out coffee was really essential for her as well. And that's completely alleviated her symptoms, and she's been able to live very successfully, healthy, high energy, great body composition, like everything just works really, really well. Her moods are much better eating 100% carnivore. So I'm still in a carnivore household. Our dog is also 100% carnivore. So we feed her that way. But yeah, to answer the question, my diet. A day of eating for me usually looks like I'm trying to gain weight right now. I'm trying to build muscle. I'm about 200 pounds right now. Trying to put on another 10 or 15. And so right now I eat most days over 5,000 calories a day. And it's usually split up in 5 meals. More of the carbohydrates are concentrated around my training. So when I wake up, I'll usually have either chicken or beef and cream of rice. Like I mentioned, it's just like plain white rice flour. mixed with hot water. It basically makes like, it's almost like an oatmeal without any fiber and without a lot of the anti-nutrients. And then some fruit. And then I'll work out. During my workout, I'll usually have dextrose. So that's just like a carb powder. I'm doing really demanding glycolytic exercise, so that pretty much just gets shuttled right into my muscle. And then, my post-workout is usually whey protein or beef protein powder with a huge bowl of cream of rice and a little bit more fruit. And then throughout the rest of the day, I'm eating like sometimes, occasionally some gluten-free carb sources, but mostly potatoes, cream of rice. And each meal is like a serving of protein. It's either a whey protein powder, but more commonly it's a whole food. It's either beef or chicken. And then at night I'll have Greek yogurt to end the day. And so that's a pretty typical day for me.
Yeah, a couple. Karen asks, did you ever feel like you were addicted to carbs and reintroducing? Were you worried about that, or was that an issue for you?
Yeah, I was worried about that. And when I started reintroducing them, I will say that the blood glucose spikes and crashes were more dramatic. From what I've read, this is something that can take like 2 or 3 weeks to adjust. So sometimes people on a low carb or carnivore diet will say, oh, I had some fruit and my blood sugar went crazy. And that just convinced me that I should never eat carbs. Your metabolism does adapt. And when you haven't had any source of carbs for a long time, it's very likely that you'll have that response. People talk about metabolic flexibility, but actually when you're eating low carb, the way your body adapts and becomes so good at making ketones, you're actually really inflexible metabolically in some ways. So your body can't tolerate large amounts of glucose at first. So I did feel some of those swings and like mood changes and feeling sleepy, but that went away after a week or two. And I was also introducing them very slowly. I didn't go 0 to 100. It was like one banana a day for a long time. So yeah, I did have that. I didn't feel I had to restrain myself. I didn't never get that like binge mode almost, or like couldn't stop eating. And I didn't really feel addicted to carbs. I'd say like the way I felt eating carbs post doing 3 years of carnivore was very different than how I felt eating carbs before carnivore. I felt way more in control and way more steady, and seeing food, like I didn't get huge cravings for different types of food. And I don't now. It's weird. It's like, it's more like fuel. It's kind of how people feel on the carnivore diet as well. And I also just like developed such a taste for like a fatty ribeye that, things like French toast or pizza or donuts or whatever like that, it never really, it still doesn't appeal to me. So hopefully that answers your question, Karen. And then Danny, why do you use carbs for sleep? I use the carbs for sleep. It was less like carbs cause sleep or anything like that. There are some people who make that argument. It was more around my digestion wouldn't tolerate the vast amount of fat and protein I was eating. And so carbs were the only thing that, you have to eat one of the 3 macronutrients. And so by reducing fat and protein, I had to make up for it with carbs.
Yeah, I see a couple interesting points. You mentioned, and we know that people on low carb diets, if they're going to take an oral glucose tolerance test, they're almost always going to fail it because they're just not adapted. And that,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear if you reintroduce carbs over, a couple days to a week or two, generally that improves. Your body is very capable of just, rehandling those things physiologically. Now, whether psychologically you can handle that, or whether you have GI symptoms, and all, those are all different things. And then, I've been doing a lot of just some reading on sleep and food and meal timing, and it's kind of interesting if you look at the sleep research. What you find is that some studies will show that like I do better when I don't eat at night. When I eat early in the day, I sleep like last night. I had my last meal by 4 p.m. and I slept like a baby last night. Woke up feeling great and went and got a quick workout in. But there is literature that it's kind of a little bit all over the place, and some of it shows that like fat content for women has a bigger effect than men at night. And some studies show that carbohydrates late at night do tend to lead to better sleep. But if you're not eating carbohydrates and you're eating something else, it might be a different issue. And so it's kind of one of those things where there's a lot of variation there, and it's not, because a lot of the studies are just standard American diet. Does it eating late or early help you sleep? And that's not that helpful for somebody on a carnivore diet, because it's a very
Yeah, definitely.
different sort of thing. And your point about, urinating and waking up in the middle of the night. And that's the thing I found is, if I eat a lot of protein, you got to deal with it. I mean, you got to deal with that nitrogen. And one of the ways is going to be by, urinating off the urea and some of the other, basically urea. So that's something that you have to deal with. And the protein, I mean, I'm somebody who eats a lot of protein. I mean, I'm 300 grams, some days 400 grams, and generally tolerate that pretty well, but I have to stack it in the early part of the day for sure. Phil's asking about dairy. I mean, I didn't hear much about, I can't remember. Oh, you said Greek yogurt. So, and there are a little bit of carbohydrates in there. Do you find that the dairy carbohydrates hit differently than so the lactose hits differently than say the fructose, glucose, sucrose that might be in fruit, or do you notice any difference?
Yeah, I don't know. I have never been a big dairy guy at all. You know, on carnivore, I didn't eat dairy. I didn't eat cheese for the 3 years really, and post, it just never seemed to satisfy me. And I did, I get I forget what it's called, like the casomorphines or whatever, and cheese sometimes trigger this addictive response in certain people. I'm definitely one of those people. And so I've never been a big dairy eater. Didn't really agree with me. Doesn't really make my digestion super happy. So other than Greek yogurt, yeah, I don't eat a lot of carbs. But yeah, there's some carbs in Greek yogurt, not a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, so you compete in rowing 149, you're 200 right now. That's a pretty big swing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Do you have a goal? Are you like looking to compete in powerlifting, or what's your current, just be bigger for the heck of it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, build my physique, get bigger, and then be able to diet down and get lean. I you know, basically I was extremely malnourished. I was 100 post rowing, post college. I did DEXA scan, and you can argue about how accurate those are. Um, but I was 160 pounds and 20% body fat.
Mm.
And I always looked lean, but I just didn't have any muscle whatsoever, especially in my upper body, in my chest. And I had extremely low bone density for my age. I actually had below osteoporotic levels of bone, 3 Z-scores below the mean, which all the doctors had never seen in someone my age who's, otherwise healthy, exercising, eating high protein, sleeping, etc. And so actually I started testosterone replacement therapy when I must have been 4 years ago now with a doctor, because my total testosterone level was chronically like 150 nanograms per deciliter, which for folks listening, the normal range for all men is like 350 to, they keep changing it, but like 850 and 900. And so I had chronically had really low testosterone and really low estrogen, which is really important for your bone mineral density, especially the estrogen piece. And so I, have been working with a doctor, getting regular blood work, been on TRT for 4 years. And that just had a dramatic effect on my mood, on my well-being, on my physique, in like 2 or 3 years of that, plus a carnivore diet, I was able to gain on the DEXA scan 28 pounds of lean body mass and lose 16 pounds of fat at the same time. And it didn't feel like a massive effort. And so, that I was pretty much prepubescent at like 20, 23, 24. If you see the pictures, people look at that and they're like, you look like you were a small teenage boy. And so that's helped tremendously. And yeah, I've just been, since starting TRT, I've been able to build muscle for the first time in my life. I've enjoyed training a lot more. And yeah, I've been packing on the muscle, and I think maybe someday I'll compete in bodybuilding. We'll see, to be determined. But for now, I'm just really enjoy the discipline of going to the gym, seeing myself improve, getting that feedback. So yeah, it's mostly just recreational.
How old are you again, Scott?
I'm 29.
29. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking because I think many men sort of peak in strength, early 30s. That's when I know when I was deadlifting, close to 800 pounds. I think it was 33, and so
Yeah.
it's just interesting about the bone mineral density stuff and the chronic exercise you're doing. Of course, in a rowboat, your gravity is kind of not on you. You're sitting the whole time, and that is one of the criticisms that it's you're not fighting gravity, and that's why I guess heavyweights have an advantage because they're not having to carry their body weight. They're just to a degree, particularly on like
Yeah.
a Concept 2 rowing machine. That's why I've
Yeah.
had success there. Interesting, we had I don't know if she's in here today, but we have one of our members, Nancy, who popped in yesterday to let us know that her bone mineral density went up significantly from the osteoporotic class to normal on a carnivore diet. And she's very different. I'm guessing she's in her sort of 60s and had cerebral palsy her life and was very sedentary. And now she's started, eating a meat-based diet, a carnivore diet, and doing a little exercise, and has seen a dramatic turnaround. So that's great to see that the bone mineral density can recover because
Yeah.
we often don't see that. That's and people put people on these drugs, bisphosphonates, and they have some pretty nasty side effects in some
Yeah.
cases. So that's good to see.
Good for her. That's amazing. That's really commendable.
Yeah, I mean, and do you still get on the road? Do you still hop on a Concept 2 every once in a while, or have you cut?
No, no, I, I'm scarred from that.
That's
You
a
know, I,
torture
I
device.
was,
Yeah.
my rowing career, I was the guy who tried to outwork everyone.
Mhm.
I did not have the leverages for rowing. My wife is 5'3", 5'4", and our hips are the same height. So
Yeah.
I have really small legs and a long torso. I'm 5'10". So I should have been a wrestler or like a rugby player or something like that. But I was stubborn. So, I rode competitively for 8 years and I just hammered the hell out of the erg and really worked very hard and did some bad things to my back. I never had a disc issue, thankfully, but just really bad back spasms, debilitating back injuries. And so I haven't erged in years, in almost 10 years now. I just stick to the weights.
Yeah, I've got it in my garage. I hop on there every I get sort of just kind of interested in what I can do. And I find it's kind of interesting, and I came to it with a very, very strong back to start with. Like I said, I already had a 700 plus pound deadlift when I started
Wow.
rowing, and
Yeah.
so it didn't feel very hard. And I'd throw it on max drag and take the cover off, and I'd
Yeah.
have a drag factor of over 300, and it's
Wow.
and I just pull the hell
Yeah.
out of the damn thing. And I mean, even today, I mean, I can still jump in there and pull a 500 sub 120 without even hardly training. So
That's great.
but so obviously you're not doing that any erging anymore. What does your day-to-day training look like then, as far as weights and stuff, squats, deadlifts, all that big
Yeah.
compound movements?
So, I'm active outside of the gym too. I walk about 15,000 steps a day with my dog. Living in New York City, that's pretty par for the course. And my wife and I live fairly close to Central Park, so we're able to get a little escape to nature, quote unquote. And then I do, I guess you could call it cardio. It's like walking on the incline treadmill at a high speed 2 days a week just to get my heart rate up. But I'm in the gym 5 days a week. Do kind of an upper lower body split, and it's usually 20 hard sets, working sets per workout about, and it's bodybuilding style training. So I'm trying to, unlike a power lifter, I'm trying to lift the least amount of weight possible to grow my muscle. I'm really interested in full range of motion, perfect form, moving slowly, milking the eccentric, the lowering portion of the weight, pausing in the stretch position, really just trying to stimulate my muscle as much as possible without putting undue stress on my joints, on my tendons. So the way I lift is probably very different than a power lifter or a strongman or someone who has strength goals. Instead of doing a heavy barbell squat, I do a hack squat, and I pause at the bottom, like the hack squat machine. Instead of doing it, I can't deadlift right now at all for my back. So it's just a lot of like leg curls very slowly. And then, I don't bench. I do, dumbbell incline bench and bench machines and things like that. So it's very bodybuilding oriented.
Yeah, and that's a very different thing because a lot of people like when I'm training, I'm not a bodybuilder, I never will be, never have an aspiration to do that. I don't have the mentality, nor do I have the genetics or the proportions to ever do that. So my goal has always been athleticism and explosivity and that sort of stuff. And right now my focus is on strangling people in jujitsu.
Well, you look phenomenal despite that, Shawn. So I think all of us would be envious of your physique.
Well, I mean, it's something, you put in 40 years of training, my God, you better be in shape, you don't know what the hell you're doing. I mean, for some of that, but yeah, I think I'm glad you're doing it now because, I can tell you, right now is the most effective time, but any time is good. But I mean, in your 20s and 30s as a male, you can lay down so much muscle. You're at such a nice place physiologically. And once you get it, it's just, now maintain it. And this is the thing I was saying right now, I don't really have to do much relative to what I used to do. I mean, I just maintain. And I think diet, constantly eating adequate protein and adequate cholesterol. Remember, cholesterol is anabolic. I mean, for people that don't understand that, the cholesterol that only comes in animal products has a
Yeah.
definite anabolic effect. And so just sitting there eating meat all day long and doing what I think is a bare minimum, and my bare minimum might be hard for many people, but relative to what I'm used to doing, I just maintain. I've been sitting at 240 pounds now for 15 years. I mean,
Wow.
consistently without any significant effort. Now, if I want to go significantly heavier than that, then it's a different story. But for me
Yeah.
to maintain 240, that's a lot of weight for most people.
Yeah. It's a lot of
And
muscle.
and probably 215 of it's lean tissue, and so it's pretty happy with where I'm at 55. But so your wife, it's interesting with your wife with the Crohn's disease because that's something that I think uniquely a carnivore diet and often a strict carnivore diet is so effective at. Has she seen any other Crohn's people, or have you got? Have you seen any people with inflammatory bowel disease, and that includes ulcerative colitis too? Has that been part of what you've seen in this carnivore experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that can help people tremendously. And it's so hard to compare the subjective experience of different ailments. How do you compare someone with major depression or anxiety versus someone with IBD or Crohn's disease? They're both terrible, and I wouldn't wish them on anyone. But I'll just say that gastrointestinal issues can be so debilitating. Anyone who's had food poisoning, or been had a stomach flu for a few days know how awful your whole body feels, and like how difficult it is to do anything. You're ashamed, you're sad, you're low energy. You feel like you can't go out places. You're questioning every single thing you put in your mouth, not knowing what will this do to me in a couple hours. And so that's something that the carnivore diet can be extremely effective for. And I think, people, even before the carnivore diet was popular, if you look at some of the Crohn's recommendations, it's reduce grains, it's reduce raw vegetables and fruits. And really, in some places they also said reduce red meat, but still they were getting some of it right. So I think this has been a common way to alleviate a lot of gastrointestinal issues for a long time, and it can be so effective for people, if only as an elimination diet, but also long term. And so, I've seen a lot of people who have helped a lot of those problems. And I think it's carnivore diet is one of the most effective treatments for that.
Your wife's, how about your wife's gastroenterologist? Is he on board with this? Does he
They
care?
weren't at all. Uh, they, she told them. So her CRP went from 50 down to like 0.2 after doing carnivore, and her symptoms went away completely. And she said to the enterologist, like, hey, I made these changes to my diet. I found these foods are problematic for me. This is really helping. And she goes, yeah, I don't think this is food related at all. She completely denied the association between food and gastrointestinal issues. Like, and she, like my wife, Marissa, she really tried to talk to her about this, like dig in, like, why do you think that's the case? They see it as completely separate. Or at least this one did. And, you know, they were just trying to get her to take these Crohn's medications, which have really nasty side effects, and they're lifelong drugs. And they can do terrible things to like your mood, your well-being, and they can actually make the Crohn's worse in a lot of cases. So she's, you know, what happened is she would have these huge flares, and then she would go and she would try a strict carnivore diet, and the doctor would say, I really think you should start these drugs. And she would say, no, I want to wait three to 6 months, see how I deal without it before committing to this lifelong thing. And they were like, we don't necessarily agree with that, but she ended up never having to take any of them.
And did the doctor rechange her mind, or she continue to see him, or she say, screw you, I'm done?
Yeah, she just pretty much walked out the door, didn't go back.
Okay. Interesting. It's kind of interesting if you could, I mean, I don't know many gastroenterologists. I mean, I know one, Pran Yoga Nathan, who you may be familiar with, and he's in Australia, but he totally gets it. He's like, yeah, diet of course has a role here. Let me ask you, because you're on a very different diet. You know, you like I said, you're including, rices and fruits and things like that. Do you think you could have went straight to that diet given where you were, 5 or 6 years ago or whenever you were, do you think you could have just went to that, rice, fruit, meat diet and had the same instance, or do you feel like you had to have gone through the elimination phase? Or obviously it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, my honest answer is I don't know, but I would say like very convincingly 90% sure that yes, I absolutely had to go through carnivore diet. Like I said, my reaction to some of those foods, my the way I felt about foods, my mentality towards food, my reaction to the way my body processed those foods was all very different after doing the carnivore diet for a long time. And a lot of the symptoms that I had pre-carnivore just never came back. So it would be very hard for me to see a world in which I could have just tweaked the diet a little bit, because I was already eating pretty close to what I'm eating now. I don't think it would have resolved itself. I'm fairly confident that I had to do carnivore, and that carnivore really helped me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I know you're familiar with the concept of this Revero, and so we still, obviously have carnivore aspects, and but we're looking at different diseases and different people in different situations, different demographics, lifestyle, and seeing if there are diets that you can do that some people will need to go through a strict elimination phase, some people need to stay on it, and other people will be more like you, where they can sort of do this, fix their issues, or do something close to that, fix the issues, and go from there. And that's, I think it's very valuable. Like I said, if anything, I think there's no place for dogmatism in this diet space, because then you turn into veganism, which is just a whole nother topic, an ideology and a disease in itself. And I try to not for the limited influence that I have, and there's a lot of people out here now. I mean, that's one thing that's interesting to see how, 5 years ago, 6 years ago when I started publicly talking about this, I was kind of there were a few, obviously there's Amber O'Hearn and Charles Washington and Kelly Hogan and, all these folks that have been vocal, but, I think, not to sort of brag or anything, but I think, me going on Rogan and then followed by Michaela Pearson and Jordan Pearson really expanded.
Yeah, brought it to the mainstream.
Well, at least some people's attention, and now it's just, there's entire. I mean, the nice thing I think is there's industries now. I mean, there's carnivore crisp and carnivore snacks and carnivore bars, and so there's, obviously there's a market for this now, and so. I think I had some small part in creating that. And, but it's definitely kind of taken off and it's kind of went on its own. And, like I said, whatever works for people is what I'm saying. But it always, so sometimes, I get a little shudder when I hear people saying that, all carbohydrates are poison and all vegetables are poison. And I've never came to that. I said I said there's reasons why people don't tolerate them, and these are the compounds that are in there. And
Yeah.
maybe you would do best to limit those or eliminate those for
Yeah.
now or maybe even forever. But anyway, it's very different.
Yeah.
Where do you, so what are your goals over the next couple of years with Carnivore Cast and maybe for your own personal, I mean, I don't know what you, I assume you do something outside of doing a podcast once a week,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I have a full-time career. I work for a technology company called Dutchie. Actually, they're based out in Bend, Oregon. They provide basically the tech you need to run a cannabis dispensary. So I've yeah, podcast is a hobby. It's a labor of love. I do enjoy it a lot and enjoy it more than my job at times, definitely. But it's never going to be my sole income. It's never going to be career for me. I don't want it to be because I really enjoy it the way it is. It's 5 to 10 hours a week of work at most. And I put out one episode a week, no matter what. And so I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to provide great content to people. This year, my goal is to have a lot more doctors and experts and researchers on. Over the last year, I've defaulted to having more and more N=1 case studies, which are phenomenal. It's an honor to have someone who's never been on a podcast come and share their story with me and my audience. And I take pride in the fact that, these people like Brett Lloyd and Nevada Gray, I was their first ever podcast, which is awesome. It's really cool to have that honor. I want to get back to still having those people, but having more of the experts like yourself, Shawn. That's my goal for the podcast. And outside of the podcast, I'm married. My wife and I are happy. We're finally in a place where we think we can travel again. We never got to have our honeymoon because we were married right before the pandemic. And so we want to do some travel this year and, thinking about maybe in a couple of years starting a family. So yeah, that's really my personal goals and what I have going on outside of the podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's great. And I got to tell you, it's kind of funny. We're going the other way. I don't know how many people I've talked to that are doctors and scientists, and just on and on and on. And I actually enjoy talking to the success stories, because to me that's where the rubber meets the road, really. Because
they're great.
You've got the theory and you've got the science, but at the end of the day, what actually works? What are the results people are getting? Because this is, there's a difference between, people talk about facts over feelings, but I say results over facts, because, you can tell me that this is a fact, but what does that actually mean to me in the big picture of things? And so I love the results things. And so we're going to be doing a little more of that here. And we've been.
Yeah. One thing I've always admired about you, Shawn, is you've always been incredibly practical. Like, this works, this will help you, this can help a ton of people, this is what we're seeing, people did this is what happens. Like, going all the way back to the N=many stuff, and just the way you break down the diet and simplify it for people and democratize it for people and make it accessible, I think is phenomenal. Like, I think Mark Bell has a similar approach, and there are a few others who really think about it that way and think about, like, how can we do the most good and help the most people? And it's really special. And that's what's changing the most lives.
Yeah. And like I said, I think, when you make it very complicated, you tell everybody you've got to eat the finest grass finished regenerative agriculture with, 17 parts of this and that, and it's just difficult. And I wouldn't have done the diet. I personally, if somebody said I had to do, I'm just not of the person that sits there and measures and calculates and worries, and I just say, just give me a damn steak and
Yeah.
a few eggs in there, and I'm good. And I think that helps a lot more people than the other, because again, you sort of, like you said, democratizing it. When you construct a diet that no one can afford or no one can access except for a few rich dudes, and I'm over simplifying this, but I mean, honestly, that's what you end up doing, and you don't really help that many people, and they don't need that much help anyway. What you need to do
Yeah.
is help the average person that's really, just struggling and don't know where to go, and you just simplify it. And most people, and it may be perfect, it may not be perfect, but it's going to bring them so far into the right direction, which I think
Yeah.
is really cool. What else was I going to mention here? Yeah. So yeah, for starting a family, that's a big one, man. That's a lot of that changes things tremendously.
Yeah.
I've got four of my own, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, but sleep doesn't go as well, and it's tough to do all that stuff. But it's interesting. Um, you said you've done 200 podcasts. What are some of the memorable podcasts you've had? I mean, that you would rate as maybe the top couple that you've done, if people want to go and listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, the ones with you have been phenomenal. So people should definitely check those out if they're a fan of your work. I'd also say, some of my most popular are the amazing women leaders we have in this space, like Kelly Hogan. Done some great podcasts with her, with Bella from Steak and Butter Girl, with Laura Spath and Judy Cho, and who am I forgetting? The
Did you get Amber O'Hearn on there?
Oxalate,
Yeah.
who's
Sally Norton. Yeah,
Sally Norton. Yes, thank you, Sally Norton. And then who's the psychologist who writes for psychology? Georgia
Eve.
Eves. Yes, thank you. I'm totally blanking. I'm so sorry, Georgia and Sally. Those are some of my favorites. So people should check those out. And then, just like you said, the success stories are always awesome, always fun to listen to. So I've had a ton of those. Brett, as well as many others.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Georgia in a while. I wonder what she's been up to. I know she was having some issues with histamine for a while and something like that. But I mean, she actually put out some phenomenal work early on. I remember talking about how she just tore apart the World Health Organization. Red meat is a carcinogen thing, and showing that it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
All right, well, Scott, I've got to unfortunately go. I've got contractors in my house I got to go deal with, and we usually run this about an hour, so we're about there. But let me just, for people that want to find you, social media, podcast, I don't know, whatever else you might want to share.
Yeah, just type in Carnivore Cast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Instagram, I'm very active. Shoot me a message. I'm happy to help anyone and everyone. Send me questions. Anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Scott, thanks very much. It's been a wonderful pleasure to talk to you as always. Good luck with your getting stronger, getting jacked, man. You're looking good. The beard making you looking tougher, so you don't look like a 12-year-old kid anymore. So good for you.
Thanks.
All right, guys. We'll see everybody tomorrow. You guys have a great weekend. Otherwise, take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Shawn.